Diaz is a veteran soldier, who after spending decades fighting in war, is rewarded by the king with his own domain. It has already been a month since he was half forced into a carriage and sent away from the royal capital, and to be honest, he isn't very happy about leaving. Once the carriage finally comes to a stop, one of the officials tells him that they have arrived at his new domain, saying it is a fitting reward for an upstart orphan like him. The official hands him a map showing the boundaries of the territory, along with an inventory of supplies personally provided by the king. He explains that this grassland is called Nezros and that, from this day onward, Diaz will be known as Diaz Nezros. Diaz simply stares at him with a blank expression until the official leaves. With nothing else to do, Diaz decides to take a walk around his new domain, and as he walks across the endless grasslands, he remembers the day the king granted him this territory as a reward for his achievements during the war. He doesn't really understand what it means to be a lord, but from what little he was told, a lord's job is to live in his domain, protect his subjects, and collect taxes for the king. He keeps walking for hours, but he doesn't meet a single person, and there isn't even a tree in sight. He decides to stop and rest for a while, and as he drinks some water from a nearby stream, he can't help but smile because after spending so many years drinking muddy water on the battlefield, having access to clean water feels like a luxury. By the time night falls, Diaz comes to a decision. He tells himself that he is going to give this place his best shot, but if things still look hopeless after another 2 days, he will leave before he ends up dying out here. If it comes to that, he will simply find a nearby village and make himself useful, however he can, so that he can continue honoring his parents' dying wishes. With that, he lies down on the ground and goes to sleep. The next morning, Diaz is suddenly awakened by someone kicking him. He looks up in confusion and sees a young girl staring down at him. Before he even has time to process what is happening, she demands to know who he is and what he is doing there. Diaz calmly introduces himself and tells her that he was sleeping. She looks completely baffled and asks if he's an idiot, but Diaz simply explains that he was told to live here, and right now, his immediate goal is to stay alive because he doesn't want to die. The girl becomes increasingly frustrated, convinced that he has to be joking, but Diaz assures her that he is being completely serious. He tells her that he wants to fulfill his parents' dying wishes by being useful to others and protecting people whenever he can. The moment he finishes speaking, the horn growing from her forehead suddenly begins glowing with a faint blue light. She stares at him in confusion and asks why he isn't lying, but Diaz simply replies that he has no reason to lie, causing the horn to glow blue once again. She immediately asks whether he is an enemy or an ally, but Diaz hesitates because they only just met. Growing impatient, she demands an answer, and Diaz suddenly realizes that this is his domain. If that's the case, then she must be one of his subjects, and there is no reason for him not to stand by her. He immediately declares that he is her ally and promises that no matter what enemy appears, he will protect her. The instant those words leave his mouth, the horn shines brighter than ever before, forcing Diaz to cover his eyes as he wonders what just happened. Without giving him any explanation, the girl grabs him and drags him back to her village so he can meet the chieftain. As they arrive, Diaz notices all of the villagers staring suspiciously at him, but the only thing he can think about is how surprised he is that he somehow failed to find this village yesterday despite wandering around the area all day. When they meet the chieftain, she immediately asks the girl whether her horn glowed red at any point, and the girl, whose name is Alna, shakes her head and says it remained blue the entire time. She even explains that when she asked whether Diaz was her ally, the blue light became brighter than ever after he answered yes. Curious, the chieftain asks Diaz, if you are Alna's ally, would you also become mine? Without even pausing to think about it, Diaz says of course he would. He says everyone here is his subject, and after all, the king sent him here to protect them. The moment he mentions the king, Alna immediately draws her bow and points it at him, but before she can do anything else, the chieftain raises a hand and tells her not to be hasty. The chieftain introduces herself as Mal and asks Diaz to start from the beginning and explain exactly how the king ended up sending him here, and Diaz agrees and begins talking about his past. His earliest memories are of living with his parents. His mother always told him to do work that other people would find useful, while his father always told him to become a man who protects the weak. Those ended up becoming their final words to him before they both died during an epidemic when he was 10 years old. After losing his parents, Diaz gathered together other children who had become orphans as well. They earned money by cleaning the town and collecting rewards for hunting weak monsters, and throughout it all, Diaz always tried to live according to his parents' wishes. When he turned 15, war broke out and he volunteered to fight so he could protect the people important to him. As the years passed, he discovered that he had a natural talent for warfare, and after fighting for 20 long years, the war finally came to an end. As a reward for everything he had accomplished, the king granted him this domain. After hearing his story, Mal believes Diaz is sincere when he says he wants to protect his subjects, but she asks him one more question. If they weren't his subjects, would he still choose to be their ally? Dias immediately answers yes, but only after saying it does he realize something important. They were never his subjects to begin with, and in fact, they are enemies of the kingdom. Maul finally introduces herself properly as the chieftain of the Anakin tribe. For generations, her people have fought against the kingdom over ownership of these grasslands, but 50 years ago, they suffered a crushing defeat and were forced to flee. Dias wonders how they managed to continue living here after losing the war, so Maul demonstrates the answer. By storing mana inside the horns on their heads, the Anakin are able to cast a variety of powerful spells. Using that magic, they conceal their entire village from the outside world, hiding not only the village itself, but every trace of their presence. Dias is a little uncertain about whether Maul should really be telling him all of this since he technically serves the kingdom, but Maul reassures him that there is nothing to worry about. She explains that if his horn reading had been anything other than blue, she never would have revealed any of this to him. The Anakin possess a spell called Soul Appraiser. Whenever they are in the presence of danger or hostility, the horn on their head shines red. If the other person is harmless and bears no hostility, it shines white, while blue means that person will one day bring joy or blessings to the tribe. She explains that if Dias had lied to them at any point, Alna's horn would have immediately turned red, but it never did, and that is why she chose to trust him. Maul says she hopes Dias becomes a superb lord one day, and she offers him shelter, food, and even some livestock to help him get started. In return, she asks only one thing, that he never tells anyone about the village, not even the king. Dias readily agrees because he has no reason to cause trouble for them. As long as they don't start another conflict with the kingdom, he doesn't mind them continuing to live peacefully on the plains. Maul then casually announces that she will be assigning Alna to help Dias with his work and look after him, causing Alna to immediately let out a loud scream. The villagers help Dias set up a tent, and Alna explains that everyone in the village lives in tents, because they can quickly pack everything up whenever they encounter a danger that can't simply be avoided through concealment. She tells Dias that the rest of his supplies will be delivered shortly, and that she will teach him how to care for the livestock later. Before he leaves, she hands him a small pouch of Matani dust and explains that when it is scattered around, its scent attracts nearby beasts. If he hunts those beasts, he can bring their meat and hides back to the village and trade them for more supplies. Dias immediately heads out to hunt. After walking a good distance away from the village, he suddenly realizes that he forgot to ask Alma how much Matani dust he was supposed to use. Since he has no idea, he simply pours out the entire bag and waits. It doesn't take long before a horde of black geese comes charging toward him. Rather than panicking, Dias looks excited. His instincts from years on the battlefield immediately take over as he swings his battle axe with overwhelming strength. By the time the fighting is over, nearly half the herd has been wiped out, but Dias then realizes he has overlooked one very important problem. There is no way he can carry all of them back by himself. By the time the sun begins setting, Dias is slowly making his way back to the village with a single black geese slung over his shoulders. He feels a little disappointed that after defeating so many of them, he could only bring one back, and he figures Alna is probably going to make fun of him again. However, when he arrives, Alna is actually impressed and praises him for bringing down a black geese on his very first hunt. Dias casually tells her that this wasn't the only one he killed. He explains that he actually hunted nearly half a herd but couldn't carry the rest back. The moment Alna hears that, she immediately runs off to gather some of the villagers so they can help retrieve the remaining black geese. After hearing what happened, Maul comes over to congratulate Dias. She calls him strong and superbly manly, leaving Dias confused about what she means by manly, and when he asks her to explain, Maul tells him that a man's value comes from whether he is hardworking and dependable. According to her, those are the qualities that make a man truly manly, and anything else has value to a woman. Maul then casually remarks that if Dias were ever to marry Alna, people would naturally expect a much larger wedding gift than usual. Dias immediately tries to deny that anything like that is happening, but Maul simply laughs and tells him not to worry because humans and Anakin are perfectly capable of having children together. The next morning, Dias wakes up to find Alna preparing breakfast for him. After taking a bite, he tells her that she's a very good cook. Alna then asks what he plans to hunt today, and Dias wonders whether yesterday's haul wasn't enough. She explains that if Dias hopes to attract more people to settle in his domain, he is going to need things like a well and a privy. If he wants the village's craftsmen to build them, he will need more goods to trade. Dias immediately says he'll go hunt more black geese, but Alna quickly refuses. Instead, she tells him to hunt monsters. Their meat is too full of miasma for anyone to eat, but their claws, horns, and the magic stones inside their hearts can all be sold for a good price. Dias asks whether there are any monsters nearby, and Alna says she can use the power of her horn to track them down. Dias objects at first because he thinks monsters are too dangerous for her to get involved with, but after some reluctance, he finally agrees to let her guide him. Later that day, Diaz is outside brushing the sheep's wool when several villagers arrive with the rest of his supplies. They apologize that his yurts haven't been finished yet, but Diaz tells them not to worry because he isn't in any hurry. Just then, Alma walks out wearing clothes suitable for traveling, and Diaz can't help being captivated by her for a brief moment. The nearby villagers immediately become so jealous that they look ready to explode, while Diaz awkwardly clears his throat and tells Alma that they should get going if they're going hunting. They are in the middle of traveling when Alma recites a spell and uses magic to pinpoint exactly where a monster is. Alma tells Diaz that it's a big monster. Diaz tells her he will take a look first, but Alma refuses and reminds him that she can use concealment, and if things take a bad turn, she can always use concealment on both of them, and they can escape. Diaz and Alma look together and find out it's an earth dragon and not just a big turtle. Diaz decides to try giving it a whack. Alma warns him not to try it, saying it is too reckless to charge in alone, but Diaz doesn't listen and decides to fight head-on. He tells her to stay out of sight. Diaz takes a swing at its scaly body with his axe but finds that the scales are too tough to break through. He then switches tactics and tries going for its weak spot, but the earth dragon covers all its weak points and curls up to protect them. Alma again reminds Diaz that taking on an earth dragon is too reckless, but Diaz would rather run out of options than retreat. He climbs onto the back and continues swinging his axe, hoping to break through, but the blade begins to chip. Still, he pushes forward, using his will to reinforce his axe and keep fighting. The dragon's miasma begins to affect Alma. Diaz decides to take one final swing before retreating. The blow finally breaks his scale, and in response, the dragon launches fireballs at him. Diaz uses the opening to strike its weak point and injures the beast. The dragon gathers energy for a final fireball, aiming at Alma. Diaz seizes the moment and strikes the dragon's back, killing it.